Hello, hello, hello. In this GCSE Economics course, we're going to move on to growth of firms. So let's get into it. There's loads of ways that firms can grow, and we're going to look into those today. Before we get into those, we need to remember what the sectors are, because this helps us break down all the types of integration we can think about. So the primary sector. Generally, it's poor countries with a low GDP per capita that are involved in the primary sector. Fishing, farming, they take resources from the land and they sell them to other countries. There isn't a super high markup on these. The secondary sector. This is as countries begin to develop. For example, China. China has loads of factories across the world now. So they take these resources from the land. They might even buy these resources from other countries. They manufacture them and produce better products. It's like China buying wood from Vietnam and turning it into a chair. Next, and this is where most countries want to end up, the tertiary sector. Think about how much money you can make in the service sector. Think about Windows software. Yes, they pay millions to produce it, but then they put it online and make it downloadable and charge $100 a pop. They are making bank at Microsoft. The service is where the money's at. So moving forward, have a quick look at this graph and we can see where different countries are and how there's a correlation between GDP in different sectors in the economy. We can see that countries like the US have very little GDP from agriculture. Like I said, Microsoft, Google dominating the market. And China, still quite a heavy agricultural sector, but it's on its way. Lots of industrial and definitely a massive improvement in the service sector. This is expected to increase rapidly over the next couple of years. Then we look at a country like India. Look at the nominal GDP here. The nominal GDP is much lower than that of other countries. And they have a heavy focus on the agricultural sector. Slowly moving up the ladder as IT professionals are becoming quite common over there. Okay, moving forward. Integration then. So we need to know if a company is going to move forwards or backwards in the form of integration. So the first example of integration is when they buy a company in front of them. So that could be primary sector buying secondary or secondary sector buying tertiary. Here's an example. We have a corn producer. So this is a factory making corn in India. And they've bought the sales outlet that sells the corn, known as Corn Hub. What an ingenious businessman. So this is secondary buying tertiary, the sales part of a business. Next, backwards vertical. This same factory might end up purchasing a farm. So it's a secondary industry, which is the factory, buying the primary industry, which is the farm. Horizontal is when you have a manufacturing plant buying another manufacturing plant. And lateral is where we have companies in the same sector. So this is secondary, buying another secondary industry, but producing completely different goods. Here's a quick consolidation of these ideas. Pause the video if you need to take a look. Now, here are 3 scenarios. I want you to pause the video and I want you to identify which type of integration each of these is involved in. So number 1, a tech company buys an AI company. So this is a tertiary industry buying a tertiary industry. So this would be horizontal integration. Scenario 2, 2 retail chains merge. Again, horizontal integration. Same type. Scenario 3, a shoe manufacturer purchases a rubber plantation. So we're looking at a secondary industry buying a primary industry. So they've gone backwards in the chain. Therefore, it's backwards vertical integration. Okay? I hope we've got an understanding of this now. So here's another case study. How are ABC going to benefit from forward vertical integration? Pause the video and have a think, jot down some ideas. There's loads of reasons. Firstly, we know they're doing forward vertical integration. So we know they're going to buy a retail outlet. The question is, how will this retail outlet benefit them? And of course, there's lots of ways. Firstly then, they can have increased control. They know exactly what they're going to produce. They know the delivery deadlines and they know exactly what's going to be in the store. They know the entire stages of the process. Next, enhance profit margins. By cutting out the middleman, they can take all the profit. Very smart. No more shops buying from you and then selling at a markup. You can remove that markup and have it all for yourself. Next, greater flexibility and responsiveness. You're going to be right at the end point of sales. So you're going to have great feedback from customers that you're going to be able to respond to. And also it might give you a strong competitive advantage in terms of feedback and price. Maybe you can outsmart the competition with this one. There's a lot of Amazon sellers that are from China, which are direct from the factory. So they cut out most middlemen in that way, and it's incredibly hard to compete with them. Okay, so a manufacturer, a secondary industry, is considering buying a primary industry, likely buying a mine that digs these components out the ground in order to produce electronic products. So what benefits will they get from that? Well, supply chain control. Think about BYD, this Chinese firm. They own the entire stage of the production process for making their cars, so they can undercut their rivals. They're in a really advantageous position and they can control the supply chain absolutely. Costs are going to go down. All middlemen are cut out. They can guarantee the quality of their production with this as well. And yeah, supply chain resilience. No one can stop them from production. They own all the components. They're doing a great job, aren't they? So here's a quick summary of the benefits of each. Horizontal integration then. Your company gets bigger, you have economies of scale, you can beat out competition, and you get a bigger share of the market. Forward vertical. You're a factory buying a shop. You have complete control of what's on offer. You take that extra profit, cutting out the middleman, and you can get direct customer feedback. Backwards vertical. You can guarantee component production. Your supply chain is under control. You can choose who to supply these goods to. So you can effectively control the market in some ways. And of course, you absorb all those extra profits a firm would normally make. Lateral integration. You get bigger. You have a bigger market share. You diversify your products in your portfolio so there's less risk. Or some would say more risk. And you get to learn from other production processes that might help your older production processes. Right, moving on. Mergers. This is where two firms combine. They combine into one legal entity. Some examples include Amazon and Whole Foods, pharmaceutical companies, a big one, Facebook and WhatsApp. That was a very smart move. LinkedIn and Microsoft. Now this is the famous Zuck talking about the merger between Facebook and Instagram.
You've closed the Instagram acquisition.
Yeah,
Can you talk about it now? Why did you do it, and what are you going to do with it?
Oh, yeah. So Instagram is great, right? I mean, they're this super talented group of engineers. They're building this amazing product. They just crossed 100 million registered users. I mean, they're killing it. And the history of how this thing came together is really interesting, right? So the way that I got to know Kevin is they started off building on top of our platform, right? I mean, they had just a great open graph integration that made it so that you can take pictures with Instagram and you can share them to Facebook, and it's really first class, right? So sharing a picture from Instagram, it basically appears exactly the same as if you shared a photo on Facebook. So it's great. They did a really good job with that. And one of the things that I like to do is all of our big developers, I just like to reach out to them and get to know them personally, partially because I'm personally just really interested in entrepreneurship and helping other entrepreneurs, but also I just want to get to know the people who are doing great stuff on top of our platform. So I spent a lot of time with Kevin, and over the course of our discussions, we built this roadmap of all these things that we can do together. But then this tension started, which was, they were starting to get a lot of distribution from Facebook, and from them there was this question of, how much do they want to bet on just one company providing a huge amount of their distribution, right? So that became the strategic question for them. And on the flip side for us, there's this question of how much do we prioritize these things, right? So we have this list of cool things that we could do, but then there's this question of, okay, well, we can help them grow, but this might just be specific for them, but without the value accruing to us, we'll probably get to these things more slowly than ideally we would want to. So eventually I just brought up the idea to Kevin, hey, maybe we should just join and become one company.
So the idea of simply joining and becoming one company, think about some advantages and disadvantages of this kind of merger. So for them, they get synergy. They can basically use both apps and they can have an increased user base. And not only that, with cross-platform integration, they can exchange data from both platforms. And it was actually one of the smartest moves they've ever done, right? Because the older generation still use Facebook and they can't be bothered to change. And the younger generation are really into Instagram. So he's basically captured the entire market of people that use these online platforms. And with AI now, it's incredibly scary what can be done. Disadvantages. Well, it's a monopoly, isn't it? A monopoly on your data. If you don't know what the product is, you are the product. Definitely privacy issues. Admins have absolute access to the comments and messages you send to each other. And of course, users might resist this. They might be annoyed about this. They might be worried about the technocracy taking over, which is actually kind of a valid concern. But so here's an example I gave to students, and I wanted them to do some research. Two big companies in Thailand, True and AIS, decide to merge. What are some challenges they might face from a merger? It's kind of like Vodafone. It's kind of like Vodafone and O2 merging. So problems that would exist. The government is not a fan of monopolies. Not today, not tomorrow. They often break up monopolies. This reduction in consumer choice might lead to problems because let's say you cut out all the major firms, you become the major firm, you can literally reduce your production quality and increase the price, and consumers will have no choice but to pay. But if you have lots of companies in the market, consumers will have choice, and therefore that will lower prices and increase quality across the board. Also, it can be really complex to integrate these systems. What happens if you got one accounting team here and one accounting team there, but they're doing pretty much the same job with different software? That could be really frustrating, merging those departments. There might have to be layoffs and whatnot. You don't want people doing the same job across the teams. And that's why I said point 4 is really important, workforce consolidation. Like, it causes a lot of distrust among people in the organization worried about losing their jobs. Think about what's going on in America right now with Doge and the government. People are fearing for their jobs. Other problems can include brand integration. How are they going to integrate them successfully, or do they keep them separate? What about transitioning the customers? I said this before, but when I had a bank in the UK, it was Lloyds. They became Lloyds TSB. The government broke them up because they are a monopoly. And now I'm with TSB. I didn't choose TSB. I chose Lloyds. Crazy. And how do you integrate and merge these two cultures? Really, really tough stuff. So, general benefits and risks of mergers then. Benefits can be economies of scale. So basically, as the company gets larger, the average cost of production might get lower. Maybe. So this might be because, especially in the phone market, this might be because they can utilize towers and they can run both types of frequency from the towers. They could buy more towers at once, leading to cheaper deals. And as I said before, they might be able to cut some accounting teams in different departments, make people do a little bit more of a workload and save money in that way. However, there is a risk, of course, of them going on this side. We'll talk about that in a moment. So there's financial benefits. They can also get better rate of loans. If they want to borrow $1 billion, they might get a great rate on their loans from banks, because banks love to loan money to big companies that have a lot of assets. As I said, they might cut out head offices and cut down on people necessary, so that could save a lot of money. And it cuts out another competitor, doesn't it? Also, this new influx in money and combination of ideas can lead to better R&D in the general space, and therefore might lead to greater technology advancements. So there are some benefits when firms monopolize, especially if they reinvest the profits. We call that dynamic efficiency, and it can keep them above all the competition. So yeah, it could be greater efficiency, but that one's hard to say. So again, the risks. Integration, as we said before, merging two companies, very difficult. Lots of culture clashes, as we said. What if you get rid of talented people, but you don't realize they're talented because you've always been stuck on one side and you know that team well, but you don't know the other team? And like I said, they might fall into this plane here where they get so large, there might be jobs that are no longer necessary. There might be jobs that are repeated, and managers might be in charge of more people than they are before. So there might be managerial diseconomies of scale where they can't get to everybody and efficiency lowers across the board. There's also financial risks. You buy out the other company. How much money is available to improve or integrate? What about customers? How will they feel about their shift to being under a new umbrella organization? This usually encounters loads of problems. For example, when my bank merged with TSB, the new software was a real pain to set up. What made it worse is they changed the IBAN number. Can you believe that? The international bank account number, they changed it. So once I sent money home, it got rejected and I couldn't believe it. What kind of bank changes an IBAN number? Wild. So in evaluation then, a company needs to decide the benefits and whether they outweigh the negatives of a merger. What side of the economies of scale graph are they on? Can they benefit from it? Will they gain a significant increase in power? Will they be able to take out a competitor? Will they have more control over the market? And what about the government? Are they going to be able to avoid the commission looking at them like the banks are unable to? All difficult questions. So going further into this concept of economies of scale, we need to break it down into internal and external, okay? So internal economies of scale. When a company gets larger, they can benefit from a lot of things. So as a company gets larger, internally, this is decisions happening inside the company, they might benefit from lower average costs because economies of scale is on this side. And this can happen. And it can happen for these reasons. They might have people becoming specialized in production, like in car factories. They might have a lot of investment in tech and the tech improves. Benefit from bulk buying. Instead of buying 100,000 drinks, now they can now buy 1 million drinks at a discount. And like I said, when they borrow money, they can borrow a much better rate. But what about the negatives? In large organizations, there's so many communication issues, and this can lead to inefficiency. Red tape between departments. Sometimes job roles aren't clearly defined, and that leads to so much red tape with getting things done. Department A needs to communicate with Department B. And then Department B passes this off to Department C. And then Department C say, this is not my job, and pass it back off to Department A. These cyclical bureaucratic errors occur all the time in large organizations where it's a blame game and no one can be bothered to do the work. Workers might feel alienated. If you've got to produce these same things day in, day out, it might feel lonely and disconnected. Sadly, in places like Foxconn, there's a massive suicide rate in China because people are unhappy with their working environment. Next is external economies and diseconomies of scale. And basically, these are positive cost-saving things that happen outside of the business and negatives that can happen outside of the business that lead to increased costs for your company. Can you think of any? Maybe jot them down. So here are some economies of scale where they benefit. What if a country has infrastructure improvements, better rail, subways, better roads, skilled labor? If more universities pop up in the country, the labor will become more skilled. If you have loads of firms doing the same stuff in the same area, you're going to have access to better, more skilled employees. Governments might promote these kind of businesses. The Chinese government loves to promote high-tech businesses and offer subsidies for them. And what if the banking sector improves? Companies might have way more access to finance than they had before. But again, things that happen outside the organization, which are external economies or diseconomies, might lead to negative aspects. So external diseconomies include these things. Traffic on the way to work, we all know about that. Pollution, environmental degradation, not being able to open your window in some parts of Asia. Competition for resources, pushing up the prices, making your cost of production higher if you haven't done backwards integration. This can lead to social tension. So let's look at a scenario. I want you to have a think about whether this is an internal or external economy of scale or diseconomy of scale. Pause the video and have a quick think. Okay, so we know the company is expanded and we also know they're having benefits. So it has to be an economy of scale. This is a managerial decision, so it's internal. So it must be internal economy of scale. Next, pause the video and have a guess. This is happening outside the business, but it's creating benefits. So it's an external economy of scale. Okay, exam question. Explain vertical integration in relation to the car industry. Generally, a 4-mark question is point, explain, point, explain. Can you think about what the mark scheme wants for this? Pause the video and... All right, so our first mark, we need to define what integration is, don't we? So basically, the first 3 words are explain vertical integration. So let's explain what it is, and then we'll put it into the car industry. So, vertical integration, when firms engaged in different stages of production combine. So now we need to explain backwards and forwards integration, don't we? And it's probably best to give an example for these. So, backwards integration. Think about BYD in China, the Build Your Dreams brand. They own mines, so they mine their own resources. So we have a manufacturing plant in the secondary stage of production buying up elements of a primary industry, meaning they can cut out the middleman and they control their supply chain. But also, they might integrate in a forwards manner, so forwards vertical integration, where they buy the shop like Tesla did, where they display their car in their own shop, so they control the entire stage from mining to production to sales. So basically just explain that. And in this mark scheme, this is where you get 4 marks. It is a little bit strange, isn't it? Because, so here it states backward integration and gives an example, and you get 2 marks for that. But here it states forward integration and gives an example, but you only get 1 mark. These mark schemes are weird. Don't trust them. As an examiner, I'd be happy to give that 2 marks. So in regards to answering these questions in economics, more is more. We mark positively. So for safety, point, example, point, example. You know what I mean? That'll get you the 4 marks. All right, that's it from me. If you fancy any private lessons, just click the link down below. Have a great day, and I'll see you again.